must, he supposed, have lost consciousness upon the fall, for when he opened his eyes, he was lying on the bare boards of the stage. As he lay there, he braced himself. No doubt Linton would have something to say about how things went in the graveyard. Yet there was no tirade, not at all. No frothing hellcat, just silence. Marley risked a look around. There was no one there. And no set either. Whatever backstage poltergeist this place employed had evidently completed their work and moved on. Only one remarkable thing lay on the stage. It was Linton's clipboard and reservoir pen. He'd never seen her without them, and now they were discarded. He hauled himself to his feet, the silence shattered by his chains, scraping and clanking as he made his way from the stage. He went out to investigate the hallway again. There was no one there. No imps were bustling up and down, paintbrush in hand. No seamstresses were pinning gossamer onto a mannequin. No gibbering horror sat in a chair, quietly completing a crossword. There was no one here. No one at all but him. Marley explored the rooms and spaces. The whole place seemed to have been abandoned. The green room just held a collection of washing up. Madame Crowell's costumery lay as silent as a grave, and the workshops and offices were derelict and forgotten. Marley explored in this fashion for some time, but increasingly he found himself back at the stage, as if the corridors were always leading him back there. More often than not, Marley found himself back at the stage. It was as if the corridors were changing their layout to keep leading him back to it. He went over to the fallen clipboard. He had wondered what notes Linton had received upon it, and now was the time to find out. He grabbed it up. There were just scribbles on it. They lay in lines as if somebody had attempted to make something that would look like writing from a distance. As Marley watched, the scratching sound came again from the paper. A line of loops appeared upon it. Something that looked like writing, but was not. Was even this a lie? He flung the clipboard aside and its pages scattered. Who was this production for, he wondered? If he and Scrooge were the players, then who was the audience? He went to the curtain. He would see through there if he could, but the chains sewn into the curtain were too heavy to lift. He couldn't budge it more than an inch off the stage before he had to drop it back down. What kind of audience hides from its actors, keeps its judgment to itself, reserves its applause or disdain until the curtain call, until the poor turn's petty hour on the stage is spent and gone, and with only its last breath knows what kinds of production the crowd had expected. And with that, Marley knew, or suspected he knew, exactly who made up the audience. He knew who it must be, and he wanted to have his moment with them. The curtains obeyed only one command, but with no setting, no script, no planning, who knew what would happen when Marley gave that command? What scene might he be cast in? In the doorway to the rest of the complex, the light was growing dimmer and the corridor growing less and less twisted. Well, there's only one way to find out, thought Marley, who gathered himself, faced towards the curtain, and uttered the word. Showtime! The curtain in front of him rose and the stage grew dark. A spotlight picked him out from far away. The light dazzled his eyes and would not let him see the auditorium. He was not transported anywhere at all. He could still see the boards at his feet, and there was a faint glow of footlights in front of him. What should he say? He could feel the anticipation of the space pulling at him, waiting for action. "Hello," he said. "Hello? Can you hear me? It's me, Jacob Marley." Still silence. I'm not sure what I have to say, he said, for I'm fairly sure that I was yet again drawn here by some unseen hand, by some stage manager of my soul. And I don't mean that woman or the king. No, I believe those poor things to be just as much players in this drama as the rest of us. He shuffled his feet under the glare of the spotlight. Was any of it real? I'm not sure if that's important to you. Perhaps we're all just entertainment in your eyes, but these are people's lives we're talking about. Even those of us who are dead. We feel the whips and scars of it all. We bear the consequences, even in our deaths. And what if we can change? Your chains still claim us in the end. At this, Marley rattled his chains. They echoed pathetically in the darkness. You, sir, are an absentee landlord, worse than either myself or Ebenezer Scrooge ever were. For, at the very least, we cared where infractions were committed against us. Yes, we turned poor souls out of their houses. Yes, we sent them to debtors' prisons. Yes, we blackened their names and made sure none would lend money to them ever again. But at least that was because of something tangible and real. Through my wanderings this night, sir, I have seen sights. I have seen souls brought low for sins that are paltry and trumped up. Yet others who bear only the slightest of burdens, even though their sins were manifest in life. You even set men up to pile more chains on people's shoulders for nothing but the sin of thinking badly of themselves. If I were to have carried my business out like that, sir, why, I would have been drummed out of town, I mark I would. But this monopoly of yours is corrupt, insecure, and vicious. And I'll have none of it, sir. None of it. Marley tried to walk out of the spotlight, but it followed him. The stage itself now seemed to stretch out into infinity, footlights continuing further than he could see. And yet still you puppet me, he said. Leave me be, sir. I shall not speak another word. And so he stood, Marley, in silence. The light picked him out, unwavering, unblinking, waiting. Eventually, Marley could stand it no more. Why Scrooge? He asked. Just answer that. Why him of all the souls in Christendom? Why was he singled out for redemption? He's no great prize. I know he's a fool and selfish, but there are a dozen or so worse than him I could name. One I could name who is even here now, my good self. If Ebenezer Scrooge was worthy of an intervention, a red letter day from the afterlife, then what about me? Where were my ghosts, my warnings, my horrors, my redemption? Does my soul, sir, weigh so little in comparison to that scarecrow? Still silence from the auditorium. Show me the ledger, then. Show me the ledger in which I am held in such little account, said Molly. Audit me as much as you like, but at the very least, allow me the courtesy to look over the bill, the writ that had been served against me. No? Nothing? Well then, sir, unless you are willing to face me, then I do not recognize the legitimacy of your summons. Again, not a sound stirred. Show me your face, he demanded. I will know the spotless visage of the one who judges me, and I will find spot and stain upon him. The spot of inconsistency, the stain of dereliction of duty, the mark of favoritism. Yes, favoritism. For what else could it be when Ebenezer Scrooge is held more worthy, not more worthy than me, no, I will not presume, but More worthy than even that little boy, that Tim, whose life is to be so very short. How can you allow that? How can you think that fair? Yes, I know I've mocked Scrooge for saying this, but I have been mocked in my turn, and it is not the mark of a good businessman to work under such rigged and inequitable terms, and I shall not do it. From this point forth, I shall not. The light shone on. All Marley's arguments were spent. Had they fallen on deaf ears? Did he truly expect any less? And yet, he wished to see those whose entertainment this thing had been in aid of. Then he remembered something from way back in his life, an instruction that had once been given from the stage of an Harlequinade when a clown had wanted to see those foregathered, to use them in some jape or other. Could it work? Marley could not see how it could make things worse. And so he uttered those 3 little magic words he remembered from the gaiety. House lights, please. The gas lamps in the auditorium sparked and lit themselves. Marley could at last see the audience, and there was no one there. Every seat was empty and unused. Marley couldn't be sure if there'd ever been anyone out there. No audience, he said and laughed. Of course. He thought he saw a figure at the back of the auditorium, but when he looked more closely, he saw it was only just the reflection of his self caught in the glass of the decorations. An old trick, he thought. Pepper's ghost, he thought they called it. The spotlight was out, and he could see the rest of the stage, all back to its normal size. It was very ordinary. And so it ends, thought Marley, with someone shouting into the darkness. He sighed and started to walk back towards the door that led to the rest of the backstage. If he was going to be left here, at the very least, he was going to find the green room and get a cup of tea to while eternity away with. As his chains dragged behind him, they caught onto some little object and flicked it across the stage. It skittered in front of Marley and stopped a few steps away from his feet. It was Linton's pen. It lay upon the boards like a dagger, its nib pointing towards Marley. No, he muttered to himself. It must be against the rules. And then he realized how stupid it sounded. A dead man in an abandoned theatre worrying about the rules? He was damned already. Why should he worry about breaking any more covenants of an audience that hadn't even the gumption to show up at the theatre? He grabbed the pen and held it up in front of him as if to stave off anyone who'd bar his way. And he rushed, plunged, ran back into the corridors of backstage. There was just one corridor now, and it ran straight ahead of him. Either by luck or design, it ended at the head of the stairs that led down into the Library of All Souls. He gathered his breath. Perhaps the librarians had fled in the same manner as the rest of the theatre staff. But he saw no need to be incautious. Marley descended the stairs as quietly as he could. Once at the bottom, he took up one of the candles and lit it. Off in the library, ghost lights moved in and out of the racks. The librarians, it seemed, had not abandoned their posts. Marley stealthily made his way around the space. He was looking for one book and one book alone. He knew that it might take him an age to find it, but was prepared to look as long as it took. The library was, as he had hoped, arranged in alphabetical order, so he headed towards the racks filled with the letter C's. Now, he could not make his way directly, as the librarians were all around. They roamed the racks, picking up books that had closed their covers, and putting fresh ones in their places. Eventually, Marley found the rack that he was looking for. A little family of books resided there. He saw the one he wanted straight away, glad to note that the previous reader had replaced it. He placed his candle onto a shelf and picked up the book titled Timothy Robert Cratchit. He flicked to the final page and found that the ending hadn't changed all that much. Yes, Tim now passed away in the relative comfort of a sanatorium, paid for in no doubt by Scrooge. But still he died, and much too young. It was as Marley had thought. Even though Ebenezer had learnt his lesson, the impact of the change of heart was very small indeed. Tiny Tim passed from this world in 1843. There it was, in black and white, thought Marley. In black and white, yet still in pencil. Marley brandished the pen and wrote upon the page, copying over the words, and so it was in the year. And here he had to do a little mental arithmetic. Another 80 or so years should do it, he thought, and wrote 1923. The page flexed and the book bucked as he wrote, but he pinned it and he finished his monogram. In 1923, that Timothy Robert Cratchit finally succumbed, as good an old man as the old city ever knew. With the final full stop, the book fell motionless. Marley placed it back upon the shelf. It shivered and then opened itself back to the page of the present moment. Marley realised there was a perfect silence in the library. All the books had stopped turning their pages, just for a moment, and then they began back up again, slowly at first, but with gathering pace, flipping their pages back and forth, in excitement, in rage, in pain. Marley could not tell. They fluttered so violently that some of the pages tore out. These flew around and then affixed themselves onto the spines of other books. A howl came from everywhere at once. The librarians! Marley knew those hellish tones and knew that they were baying for his blood. He knew what he'd done. In altering the end of Timothy Cratchit's book, he had changed 1,000 other lives and subsequently altered the future for millions. Marley cared not for the chaos in the Library of All Souls, not for the librarians who were advancing through the storm towards him, and not for Scrooge, who would no doubt attribute the infant's recovery to his own change of heart. Who cared, though? Tiny Tim would live, and God bless us, everyone! Marley danced in the fluttering pages. They grew denser and denser around him, catching on his chains and whipping them about. He laughed as he saw the librarians fighting through the flurry of stationery to get to him. Their eyes were red with fury and spittle flying from each capacious maw. At last, they broke through the paper-filled air, and Marley realised his ultimate fate must now be upon him, as they surrounded him, and as one, they bore down upon him.